Hello and welcome to That Shooting Show. My name's Steve Anderson. I am your humble host. We do have a very important guest today who is not Nils Jonassen, but we'll get into that in a minute. First, I want to thank my partners. Walther is the title sponsor of the show, and Gazz does not know that he has an entire crate of Walther PDPs being sent to him via DHL. They should be there any minute, Gazz. And
Okay.
and we'll get you out of that nasty Glock into something that actually fits your hand. But we'll talk about that later. Of course, Targets USA manufactures the finest steel targetry on the planet. Gaz is now, I believe, the South African distributor for Hunter's HD Gold, or that's in the works, right?
It's in the works. Yeah.
All right, so we'll look forward to that. Hunter's HD Gold is the only eyewear that I wear. CR Speed, Gaz CR Speed, how great is that?
Oh, it's the finest.
It's the greatest.
It's the
Were you,
greatest.
were you at the range when the actual inventor showed up? I think you were there that day.
Oh no, I wasn't there this time. No.
Okay, so I was over there and somebody motioned me over and literally the guy that invented the CR Speed holster and the CR Speed mag pouches was there. And I don't know that entire relationship, how that works with Taz or any of that, but he said, yeah, my first question was the cutout for the finger. And he goes, well, that's where you get the magazine from, so it has to be there. Pure genius, pure genius. So CR Speed, shootingsportsinnovations.com is a lot to type because there's a lot to see. Outdoordynamics.net, remanufacturing the finest ammunition, and of course, the AMG-lab.com Commanderson timer continuing to turn heads and blow minds. And we do have some classes coming up for AndersonShooting.com. You can always go to AndersonShooting.com and click on upcoming classes to see where we're at and what we're doing. We're going to be in North Carolina again pretty soon, going to Kentucky in just a couple of days. And there are 2 more mental management classes scheduled in October. All of these things are available at andersonshooting.com, upcoming classes. And of course, we have yet again South African national champion Garrett-John Evans, also known as Gazz. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, and you, Steve? Thanks for having me on the show again.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that the next wedding I officiate will be yours. So let's make that happen. I'm getting real good at doing this wedding thing.
Awesome. We'll discuss that later.
We'll discuss that later. So we had a conversation about, I don't know, four-ish months ago, and you told me that you still had a lot to accomplish with an iron sight gun. And then the very next week, I find out that you're rocking the dot. What happened?
Um, so there's certain things that I'd like to accomplish with the iron sights, but I was also looking for something a little bit new that would have offered me a slightly different challenge than what I've experienced with iron sights. Sasha also has been putting, let's call it pressure on me to at least just try running the optics and see how I like it. And one day I tried it and I liked it. So that's where I am.
Okay. And did you find it difficult in any way?
I didn't find it difficult. No, I think what helped is that I went from Glock iron sights to just putting an optic on my Glock. So that made the transition relatively simple for me. The most challenging for me was actually the learning how to read the gun and the optic on closer targets.
Hmm.
Medium range became simpler almost immediately, and longer range as
Yeah,
well.
as well. So people talk about target focus and dot focus. I don't remember having any of those. Well, I take that back. The very first shot I fired out of an open gun, I caught myself transfixed by the dot. And then I very quickly, I don't even know that I thought about it. I realized, hey, I don't need to focus on this thing. I can look at the target. And I never had any problems using a target focus. Have you seen this new trend? And I don't remember seeing it too much in South Africa. This new craze of people occluding the dot to force a target focus. Have you seen that over there at all?
I haven't really seen that out at matches and that. One thing I did when I got the dot was, because people are talking about occluding the dot and how they're doing it, I went and did that as a test to just see what it does. And for me, because I'm already running target focused, it didn't really do much in terms of training or helping me see anything new. And I think going back to the iron sights, because I was target focused for 99% of the shots that I took with iron sights, that transition onto the dot just became even more simple to be target focused more than the dot. So
And
including the dot, I'm not sure.
I just remember, well, so just to wrap that up, like so many other things, if it solves a problem for the shooter, or if it simplifies something or creates some sort of breakthrough, I'm all for it. Just for me personally, it solves a problem that I never had.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, getting my first open gun. Uh, I'll never forget this overwhelming feeling of how easy shooting has become. Right? I just remember, gosh, this makes it so much easier and so much more fun. Um, and then, of course, you realize that everybody else in your division has the same ease. I just remember thinking, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever." Do
Yeah.
you have a plan to go back to irons at some point, or are you just going to wait and see?
At this point, no, there's no plan to go back onto the iron sights. Once I'd gone onto the dot, I sort of realized that there's things that I wanted to finish with iron sights that I can do the same thing with an optic on the gun. And that right now for me is providing a lot more fun and enjoyment, and I'm starting to see some other breakthroughs that I might not have seen or had with the iron sights.
Hmm. That is one thing I remember happening, is that the shooting became so easy that it allowed and required me to focus on other things. Um, because literally, and it's so fascinating to me that people with dot guns will continue to pull the trigger when the dot is over there and wonder why the bullet didn't go where they wanted it to. I mean,
Yeah. Yep.
it's so amazing. So because Nils Jonasson was supposed to be on today, I got a ton of questions for him. So I'm going to let you answer some of the questions that people sent for Nils. And then once he is available to come back, we'll be able to compare your answers to his answers and see who has the superior answers. Okay. The number one question people want to know about is stage plan, stage plan, stage plan, stage plan. You know that I think that is slightly overrated as a priority. But I do wonder, how important to you is your plan versus somebody else's?
So for me personally, my plan is the most important plan that I can come up with. Um, and I've had it in the past where someone else has come up with an ulterior plan, and I chose for whatever reason to decide that that was a superior plan, which it wasn't necessarily at the end of the day. But what it did do was it decreased my confidence to
Mm,
execute that plan. Whereas I strongly believe that if I had stuck to the plan that I originally came up with, that I was comfortable with, that generated confidence. And I can say comfortably that I think my execution of my own plan would have been better and more in line with me applying my abilities.
okay. So have you ever seen, with yourself or with somebody else, two shooters go out and execute two different plans brilliantly, right? Or well, and the sole factor was stage plan. Have you ever seen stage plan by itself decide a stage?
I'm just trying to think now, if there was a time where the stage plan was superior enough that that was the plan, I don't think that it would be more than three or four times that that's actually happened. And that I'm just sucking because off the top of my head, I can't think of one where the stage plan determined the outcome.
Right. And the fact that you couldn't list three of them immediately means it certainly hasn't been significant.
No.
And I need people to understand, when I say stage plan doesn't matter as much as people think it does, that does rule out doing dumb stuff. right?
Yeah.
This assumes that we have a general idea of how to reduce the time spent not shooting. Um, I have only ever seen one stage plan. This is pretty famous on the podcast. I've only ever seen one stage plan so bad that execution couldn't save it. And this is where a guy literally ran 20 yards to the other end of the stage to avoid shooting from right to left. That's that's just dumb, right?
Yeah.
And the best way to not break the 180 when you're moving to the left is to not break the 180 when you're moving to the left. Just don't do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is one question that I've been starting to ask people, because this is something I was never able to answer for myself definitively. If you're starting in the middle of the stage and you can shoot in the middle, or you can move left or right first, how do you decide whether to shoot in the middle versus getting out of there?
So thinking back on experience, if the middle position requires some more static type shooting, in other words, I can't shoot it while I'm moving, then I would possibly consider starting to shoot in that port. Let's call it a port. If that middle portion gives me an opportunity that I can go through that port while I'm still shooting or creeping, or at least applying something that allows me to continue moving, then I'm going to choose to go left or right first.
Yeah.
But definitively choosing, it's difficult to say.
Okay. One thing that when I asked Jay Beal the same question, he says it has to do with how long it's going to take you to fire your first shot. You know, let's say if you have a 25-yard mini popper, that might be a 1.5 first shot,
Sure.
right? Where could I be in 1.5 seconds? Meaning, could I use that 1.5 seconds a little bit better?
Yeah.
I thought that was one good way to look at it.
Yeah, that is a good way to look at it.
And we do know that Jay Beal struggles to get a first shot under a second ever, so he's always got a way that poor guy. One of these days he'll get a 99 at a really close target, and he'll be able to, he'll be able to claim that, and then he'll finally be able to work on those ridiculous reloads of his. Gosh, the revolver guys are beating his reloads. I don't know. He wanted to know what he's doing there. Poor guy. All right, so
but we love him.
One of these days he'll get quick. Let's talk about pressure. You and I have had several conversations where you have intentionally tried to increase pressure on yourself locally. Why did you decide to do that, and what kinds of things have you done to increase pressure?
So the reason that I wanted to try and increase the pressure that I was feeling, perceived pressure, at local matches, was because I feel like if I don't have a healthy balance of pressure, or at least a perceived feeling of pressure, that my performance isn't where it could be. So I'm not actually performing to my current abilities, which for a period of time was a little bit frustrating to work out. But once I worked it out, applying that pressure in local matches helped me perform a little bit better. And the things that I would do with that is I tried, and I'm still going to do it occasionally depending on the match, instead of entering for my division, which at the time might have been production or production optics, I'll enter an open. And I'd have to compete within that result bracket or that division to get the results, which automatically increases pressure because we've got some very good open shooters here that I like competing with. They're good guys. The other methods that I use to try and increase some sort of pressure, which I haven't figured out 100%.
Hang on one second. Can you hear the dogs wrestling in the background?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so let's just give that a few minutes to settle down. We're gonna, now that we finally got your audio sorted out, we're gonna get complaints. But there's a Doberman Pinscher and a Great Dane having a full-blown battle royale in there with the breathing and the nails. It should be over very.
It wouldn't be complete without dog noise.
Right. And on the subject of pets, isn't it true that for a time you did not know how many cats lived in your house? Is that true?
That's fairly accurate, yeah.
When I came to your house and met your parents, What was the number of cats at one point?
It was over 30 cats.
And not even a hint of a smell of a litter box. You would think that with 30 cats, you'd be able to smell that from outside. But your house was just beautiful in spite of all the
Thank you.
cats.
In
Amazing.
spite of all the cats.
All right, so back to pressure. Signing up and open, that's something that Jay Beal has also done. I'm not sure if he's still doing that or not. He was and maybe still is racing another shooter to Grandmaster in open, shooting his carry optics rig. I think these are great ways to increase pressure. And I was doing a mental management class last night, and I heard something so brilliant that I thought you might like. The guy is a PRS rifle shooter, and he said, "Pressure is my reward for being a top shooter."
I like that. That is
I
good.
thought, I thought you might like that, right? Because he said high level competition is the only place he feels it. So he sees it as his reward for being a highly competitive shooter. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So now he's looking forward to feeling that, knowing that he deserves it, knowing that he's earned it, knowing that he doesn't need to be afraid of it. It just blew my mind. That was a really great one.
Yeah.
Have you gone back and forth on a different point of focus or focus phrase throughout your career, and did your point of focus change when you went to the dot?
I have gone through a variety of different point of focuses, phrases, and visuals. And when I went to the dot, it did change again because it allowed me to, I wouldn't, difficult to word, but it sort of allowed me to have a simpler outlook on the point of focus, and it allowed me to have a simpler visual in that point of focus. So my point of focus, for example, has got a little bit more pictures in it. So when I initiate the phrase, which is sent to the dot called a shot, it immediately brings up a picture of my dot on a target, and vice versa that way around.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Some good dog noise. That's my favorite part of shooting with a dot, is because the sight picture is pass or fail, as opposed to maybe good enough, maybe good enough. There,
Yeah.
in my mind, there's no excuse for that gun going off when the dot's not on the target.
Yeah.
And when I'm fully immersed in that point of focus, I've created what I call a circuit between my eyes and the trigger that doesn't involve my brain.
Yeah.
And the only time my brain gets involved is if the dot is not on the target, and I may have to tap the brakes just a little bit to get it back on. But I have been burned so many times by a poor sight picture that when I'm shooting something for score, the gun just won't go off unless the dot's on the target. It just won't.
Yeah.
It's oh, here we go. Now we have a visual to go with our noise. Good grief. Get on, baby. Oh, I know what it is. They want their second meal. That's what they want. That's making some sense. And there's probably not people who are not familiar with the point of focus or the focus phrase, but I want people to understand that all we're doing is creating subconscious shooting. That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
And everybody shoots their best when they're not thinking and they don't care. But so many shooters don't try to replicate that environment when it can't be replicated by itself. Meaning, I am thinking and I do care. So I think sometimes they assume they're just not going to shoot well if they're thinking and they care. But all we're doing with the point of focus is replicating the environment in which we shoot our best, which is not caring and not thinking. Right?
Yes.
So if we can control the conscious mind and recreate the environment of not thinking, what do we do about the caring part?
So what's worked recently really well for me is that I came to the realization that the only way that I'm going to get a performance or an execution that I am happy with is if I surrender to that point of focus 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So because I care about the results and I want the results to be good, and at a match I want it to be stage by stage, so I'm not too concerned Well, that's not necessarily true, but I want to play the game stage by stage, obviously with the outcome of carrying on the totality of the results in my division.
Mhm.
And the only way that I can maintain and control that carrying component is by realizing that if I simply surrender to my point of focus, I will have my best shooting, and then I will get the results that I care about.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Have you heard me? I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'm not sure if you listen every day anymore, but when I got done with my class in New Jersey, the class sponsor handed me a 3D printed Glock
Yeah.
and had me shoot the class fire stage in front of the entire class. And the only reason I keep telling the story is because that's the most pressure I'm going to be under. For me being me and doing what I do, I need to be able to hit some targets if somebody wants me to, right?
Yeah.
And so I went through that exact cycle that you're talking about. First came the fears. What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? Okay. What if I miss? What if I'm slow? Well, I can answer all those the same way you just did. My best chance of getting a performance that I'll be proud of is to center the dot and call the shot. And I can do that with a 3D printed Glock. I can do that with any gun you give me. And all I got to do is put the dot in the middle of the target. And I'm great at that.
Yeah.
And that cycle of thought takes about 4 seconds. Right?
Yeah. It's quick. It's quick.
And then the other thing I've learned, and Jay learned this kind of the same time I did. If I smile and it's a genuine smile, I'm always going to get a great performance. Have you experimented with smiling?
I have tried, but I haven't been able to pull off a genuine one yet.
Yeah, and that's okay.
So it's a work in progress. Yeah.
And I'm
But
not saying I'm not saying that you even need to. I'm just saying for me, I don't know if it reminds me that it's fun, but it for sure either increases or provides access to confidence. Because when you're smiling, you're not worried.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the absolute most important thing when you're thinking about results is to not be worried about the results. Right? And that can take a lot of forms. So going into nationals, this was your first national shooting a dot, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you wanted a great result.
Yeah.
Did you allow yourself to believe you could win, or was this just an experiment to see where you fare on your first time out?
I allowed myself the opportunity to expect to win.
And that can't be faked, can it?
No, no.
Because you've tried that in the past, haven't you?
I've tried it in the past. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so interesting. We're going to come back to that in a minute, but I was able to have a conversation with Travis Tomasi from Masterpiece Arms about the mental game. We were doing a mental management class for that team, and I asked him about his world shoot win because he's a world champion. I'm not sure what year, but he did win a world shoot.
Yeah.
And I said, what was your self-image like going into that match? And he said, I knew without a doubt I was going to win. How powerful is that?
Yeah. No, it's powerful.
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps. And the other thing I learned is that Christian Seiler just won Open Nationals again. And one thing that I didn't realize until I looked at his social media was he wasn't predicting to win, Gazz. He was predicting to win by 50 match points.
Okay.
Right? So think about what that means. That means he's not worried about winning. The only thing he doesn't know is how many points he's going to win by.
Yeah.
Now that's a powerful self-image,
Yes.
right? That's
Absolutely.
Really. Let's see what we were talking about before that. I didn't mean to cut you off. Oh yeah, so you did allow yourself to believe you could win.
Yeah.
And did you have any mistakes or setbacks during the match that caused that to ever be in doubt?
Yeah, I did. I did.
And how did you respond to that?
The only way I could respond to it is whatever has happened is happened. It's in the past. I can't change it, but I can change what's going to happen. And the only thing that's really going to happen is I'm going to apply my mental program for whatever stages are left in the match.
Mm. And I think it can also be very helpful to understand that every shooter is going to have some kind of mistake.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever shot a perfect match with zero mistakes of any kind?
Maybe one or two locals, but nationals, no.
Yeah. And I don't know that anybody's ever going to have a perfect match from beginning to end. And the key when something doesn't go our way is to correct it as soon as possible. So that we don't let the mistake become part of our identity. Well, it's self-image, identity, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things I noticed about you when we got to train together, and how much fun was that?
Oh, that was awesome.
What a great day. I went into that thinking, I don't know if there's anything I can teach Gazz technically. And then we realized very quickly, I've still got some stuff I can help you with. That was very gratifying.
Yeah.
Remember, I even
awesome.
I was nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That may have been the second time in my life I had been nervous prior to a class. The other time was when I found out Ernest Langdon was going to be in the class. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell's Ernest Langdon doing here? And that is first challenging to my self-image. But if I control that imprint, and if I say, hey, if Ernest Langdon thinks he can learn something, I'm not going to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so much fun. And you were also
Awesome.
the first time I ever took my laptop to a class too. That's how advanced we got.
That's how advanced. Yeah.
Your shooting is so great, it required a laptop to process it. But there was something that I noticed during our time together, and that you also noticed. There's a difference between training and shooting for score. And
Mm.
those lines got blurry for us a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're training, we expect to make mistakes because we're experimenting. We're trying new things. And then switching gears to shoot for score, you did something that I see pretty frequently, and that is deciding to succeed. Do you remember us having that conversation?
Yeah.
So what changes for you when you decide to succeed?
I think that what actually makes that change happen is not me just simply stating the decision to make the change from going from training to shooting for score. It's actually listening to that decision and saying, okay, this is the decision, this is what I have to do now, which then allows me to actually surrender completely back into my mental program and to my point of focus.
Right. Right. Do you ever catch yourself thinking about something technical right before the timer goes off?
In training, yeah. In
Yeah.
matches, no.
Good. Yeah, I'm working with a Steel Challenge guy who has made some technical changes to his draw, which were unnecessary, by the way, in my opinion. But because he's made so many technical changes to his draw, he catches himself thinking about those changes right before the timer goes off.
True.
And that has to be caused by imprints, right? If we think about the performance model, he has got fear and doubt associated with every draw he does in Steel Challenge. So of course, his self-image, his identity, his thoughts about his draw are going to be of fear and doubt because those are the imprints,
Yeah.
right? And his conscious mind's still trying to work that out. And we're going to get him solved. I was just curious if you ever had those issues. Sometimes I do. The only time I do is if I'm filming a video that has a reload in it. I'll hear that nagging voice that says, "Don't F up the reload."
Yeah.
You ever heard that one?
The reload, no. But maybe on an not recently, but on certain unloaded starts,
Mm.
where guns empty, mags on table, that kind of thing. And a recent thing that I learned, but was in a training environment, is that if I try and consciously think about trigger press or something like that, then the trigger press isn't as good as if I just let it be subconscious.
Mm-hmm. And the big mistake people make in those environments is they tell themselves not to think about loading the gun or not to think about the draw. And of course, that's the same thing,
That's
right?
the same thing. Yeah.
Thinking about not smoking is the same thing as thinking about smoking, right?
Yeah.
It creates a picture, and that picture is your immediate future. So I just want to remind people, don't ever tell yourself to stop thinking about something, and don't ever tell yourself not to do something. Instead, think of what you want to do and create the picture of what you'd like to have happen as opposed to what you're afraid of. Very, very
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Um, do you think you will shoot a Glock forever?
At the moment, yes, I'm happy with the platform. Um, it's reliable, it works. I can get parts easily. I can run backup guns, so I can run more than one. So at the moment, I'm very happy with the Glocks.
Yeah. And did you ever shoot anything but a Glock? Did you get started on anything else?
I actually started on CZs when I
Okay.
first got into the sport. So I ran initially the original PO7 Duty. Then I ran CZ75 SPO1, the Shadow, the OG Shadow. And then I shot standard major for a couple of years with an Infinity, with an SVI.
Interesting.
And then I went over to the Glock in competition.
And you can probably afford 4 or 5 Glocks versus one Infinity, maybe more than that.
Yeah, maybe more. Yeah.
That one Infinity equals a lot of Glocks.
Yeah. So
And let's see, we talked about the cats. What was I going to ask you about your gun? 17, right? In production optics.
yeah, I ran the Glock 17 at this match. But I'm hoping now that they will get the new Glock 47 onto the production list because I'm going to be moving over to that. And then I'll have the 17 as a backup gun.
And what on earth is a 47? I haven't heard of this one.
So it's a Glock 17 size pistol, but it's basically got a Glock 45 frame on it, meaning that the dust cover is a bit shorter.
Oh, okay.
So it almost looks like a miniature Glock 34.
Okay.
So it's interchangeability. You can take that top end and barrel and put a 19 frame on it. You can put a 19 slide and barrel on the frame. So it's interchangeability.
And what is the benefit? What's the advantage?
So I think the 47 has a slightly more consistent return from recoil than the 17 because it runs a Glock 19 length recoil spring.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. And all of these things are simply ways to get a Glock to perform anywhere near as good as a Walther. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a PDP with a Glock logo. Isn't that true? I think you told me that off the air.
Well, that would be handy P, wouldn't it?
Now, one of my favorite techniques of yours is what I call the creep.
Hmm.
Uh, and and we're going to talk about moving versus posting here in a minute. But when I discovered the creep as the middle ground between moving and posting up, I could not believe how magical it was. When did you learn how to creep?
I don't know exactly when I learned how to creep, but from very early on when I started shooting, the guys who mentored me and that sort of stuff were talking about shooting on the move, and that became a fascination for me. So that was something that I worked on very early on. So I wasn't playing the post up game right from the beginning.
Okay.
And I think just without me knowing, as I developed the skills of shooting on the move, the creep sort of became part of those abilities that I had to shoot on the move already.
Yeah. For me, it was a lot more intentional because um, when I was coming up, Max Michel was the #1 open shooter in the country, and this was before SIG and before carry optics was even a thing. And he has the best setup probably on the planet. And I remember trying to duplicate that setup, and I got pretty good at it. I would run the plate rack. I'd start at 20 yards, run to 15, post up, run to 10, post up. And I got so good at posting up that I did it when it wasn't necessary. And one of my buddies said to me, "You're posting up too hard." And I was furious. I was like, I'm spending all my time working on this and it's the best one. And he goes, yeah, and you don't need to do it. And I was really offended by that. And then I realized he's right. Um, this is the same guy. This is my buddy Kyle Ferris, also a Glock guy. He likes them because they're cheap and he can have a lot of them. And so many of my breakthroughs was because he challenged me to do something different. And all the creep means is you establish motion and then you simply pause your body anytime the sight picture tells you to, right?
Mm.
Right?
Yep, that's it.
Do you have any specific ways to practice that by itself?
What I would normally do is I would sort of take the counting alphas setup that we do in your classes,
Hmm.
and I would make the targets really difficult for shooting on the move.
Yep.
So that would and I can also mix it. I can make some targets a little bit simpler to shoot on the move, and others I can push out or add partials that are going to force me to create that creep, so that I'm not just practicing shooting on the move really slowly. I'm being able to manage that throttle control between a target that would be simpler on the move. In other words, I can move a little bit quicker on it, and one that I really have to slow down and creep or hover for that second for that target to get engaged.
Mm-hmm. And all of that is better than establishing a formal, rigid setup stance. And that's all we're trying to avoid is removing that 3/10 of a second to stand up, and then removing the 3/10 of a second to compress again when you want to move. We're just taking all that out of the equation. We're simply pausing instead of a normal post up. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's when I discovered it for myself. I was doing that exact same drill. Prior to nationals, me and my training partner would do that drill from 25 to 28 yards. Not that we'd ever engage the target that far in the move, but what I liked about it was it made a 15-yard open target so easy. It wasn't even a choice, you know.
Yeah.
And I do remember that's when I learned it. I thought, okay, the drill requires me to be moving, but my dot is unacceptable. Therefore, I have to do something different. And I guess I figured maybe if I pause, I won't break the rules of needing to be moving.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't.
Right. I think that's where it came from. Do you have any hard data you use to decide whether to stay moving or pause or even post up?
I don't have any hard, steady, fast rules on that. If I can shoot it while I'm moving and it's going to get me into my next position sooner, then I'm going to shoot it while I'm moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it might even work out. I've had stages where it works out the same at the end of the stage in my last position. Instead of getting to the end of the foot fault and then engaging the target, if I can decelerate appropriately and shoot that target on my last step out of the box, I'm still doing it while I'm moving. I haven't had to stop, set up, and then shoot the target. So if I can, I will.
Last resort basically is going to be standing still and posting up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these questions inevitably come from people who can't make the shot while they're moving, because the people that can make the shot while they're moving, even if it's just a creep, don't ask the question. They just don't ask it anymore. Okay, so currently, how much dry fire and how much live fire?
Before nationals, I was doing 2 sessions a week live fire, and dry fire I was doing 3 times a week at about an hour per session, and then I ramped that up a little bit 2 weeks out from the nationals to have like 4 sessions. Maybe I made the dry fire session a little bit longer than an hour.
Okay. So total dry fire on a week leading up to nationals?
Between 3 and 5 hours a week.
Okay. Yeah, I remember your dry fire number has always seemed kind of low to me. Maybe that's why Jay Beal's so slow. Maybe he's dry firing so much that he's actually getting slower. Maybe that's the problem.
Might be. He's introducing molasses.
He's not going to tell anybody the truth anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So, because so many people have so many questions about stage plan. Is there a process that you go through when you arrive at the stage? Same thing every time, or do you just kind of get a feel for it when you show up?
Um, so with a lot of our stages, we don't get to view them before the match unless it's nationals, and in any case, we can't go into the stage demarcated area to view them. So when I get to a stage, the first thing that I sort of want to know is I don't want to get too invested in what I'm seeing without a briefing or stage description, because they might have a start right in the front that I can't see, which changes everything
Ah,
or has the potential to change everything. So I want the stage briefing first, but if I can't see anything on the stage that might be different to the stage briefing, the first thing that I'm going to look at is where I want to start, what's going to get me shooting the soonest off the start signal. And from there, I'm going to start looking at what's going to keep me shooting the most until the last shot's fired.
hmm,
So I'll probably start by working out where the movements need to go or where I need to go based on the stage design. And I'm going to pick the shortest route that allows me to shoot the most. As a general rule of thumb, there's certain instances where I might be more comfortable to cover more distance, but I can shoot more on the move.
right, right.
So there's that kind of trade-off based on confidence and comfort. I'm also going to look, we've had an increase in lots of wide transitions on stages, so I'm going to try and look at how I can minimize the super wide transitions. But those are sort of my general rules of thumb. What's going to get me shooting the soonest and what's going to keep me shooting consistently throughout the stage.
And then, do you have any lists of always and nevers? Like, I'm always going to do this when I see a port, or I'm never going to do this when I see something else?
No,
Any hard rules?
no hard rules like that. No.
Oh, good. One of the things that a lot of new dot shooters will do is they will intentionally take longer shots because now they feel like they can. And I just don't know if that's always worth it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I don't think it's always worth it. Um, Often with those longer shots, even if it's open targets, you're increasing the risk to score that's not beneficial to your performance.
Mm,
And oftentimes when the stage designer's intentionally done that, he's put something that's a little bit more high risk downrange. It might be a partial, it might be hard cover, that now again increases your risk on that.
mm,
So I'd rather, as a general rule, depending on the layout of the targets and that, I would want to get closer to the targets if that's an option.
okay. Yeah. It was very interesting to I don't know if you and I discussed it, but there was a stage at Carapix Nationals that allowed you to use three different shooting areas or just two. And only using two required some 35-yard shots.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fascinating that the super squad didn't come to a general consensus. And the very first thing JJ Rakaza did was time his sprint from the back area to the first area. Right? It's the first thing he did. He's like, well, I just ran this and I can get there in 2 seconds. And it's going to take me a lot longer than 2 seconds to stand back here and snipe these 35-yard targets. Right.
Yeah.
And Jay Beal chose to hang back and engage them from further away, probably because he's so slow, poor guy. If he could.
Yeah. It's that molasses. The molasses from Maine.
if he would quit running in the snow barefoot, he might be a little quicker. But the interesting thing, and I can't remember what Christian Seiler did. I think Christian Seiler also hung back. But there wasn't an appreciable difference between the two times. I mean, they were within a second of each other.
Yeah, the
Um,
outcome was so close.
right, which means something else is going to be more important, right? And going back to matches, your scoring system, does it allow you to look at results during the match?
Technically, the systems that we use are live scoring systems, but I think based on certain factors and environments that we have, they're not necessarily truly live. So there are updates that happen throughout the day, but I don't always have access to the data that I'd like. Well, I don't have access to data that might be useful during the day's shooting.
Okay. And if you found out you were doing better than expected or not as well as expected, what would you do?
I would be prepared for either of those, because normally that's going to be, or it has the potential to have an impact on what you're thinking about consciously.
Oh,
Um, well, for me, so if I see that I'm ahead of where I might have expected to be, so in other words, if I'm leading, I'm going to be comfortable with that. Okay, cool. I expect to be leading. If I'm not in the lead, it might be because some guys shot stages that I didn't and the points are imbalanced. But
mm,
there's nothing that I can change if there's nothing I can change in my mental program or my performance at a match that's going to change what the results are currently telling me overall.
right. And would you ever, or do you ever, if there was like some other super squad had shot a stage, would you ever look at that hit factor and make any decisions based on that information?
I haven't in the past, but it's a strategy that I might start looking at moving forward.
What do you think you would do with that information?
I don't think there's anything that I could do that could alter what I would do on that stage, but maybe more as a tool to see what sort of hit factors and times the guys are running, so that I know once I've done my performance whether I'm on par with that or not.
I see.
And maybe in certain instances, that data that I have access to on that stage that someone else has shot that I haven't, maybe that just tells me something about what the stage plan might have been on that stage.
I see. One thing that I found so fascinating at our Capix Nationals was Christian Seiler was not on the primary super squad, and he would come over frequently to make sure that his plan was going to be the same as the super squad consensus, if there was one. I thought that was very interesting. And then he was on a podcast recently where he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit because I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically he likes simple stage plans that he can execute well.
Yeah.
And I think that may be why he was coming over looking at their plans, maybe just to say, well, if the guys I'm wanting to beat are all doing it the same way, I can just do that and beat them with execution than having to worry about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't know that I've seen a match with more options than this one. And just to wrap up stage planning, I don't know that I ever saw, except for the really small stages, I don't know that I ever saw two guys shoot the big stages exactly the same way. And to me, that's the hallmark of good stages.
Yeah.
Right. In general, IPSC to me seems to have a little bit more go here and shoot what you see, as opposed to a lot of options. Has that been your experience?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It can be a little bit more rigid in terms of you sort of move to A and shoot here, move to B and shoot here, and move to C and shoot here. Um, but there are certain stages and elements where you find ways of mitigating that rigidity in position
Yeah.
with small things.
Right.
So things like the creep that we spoke about, having the gun up earlier than anybody else
Oh
when
yeah.
moving into that new position, those sort of things, that's when we start looking at that more closely.
Okay. And regarding movement, because you're such a technical guy, have you broken down things like specific muscles and feet angle, and have you broken it down that much?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't.
I I'm sure that there's a benefit there on a certain level. I have never seen a stage decided by the angle of somebody's foot or which muscle we think they might have used to spring out of position. I don't know what to do with that data, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I do remember at Production Nationals, the one that I won actually in master class, Seeklander gave us a 10-minute lecture on how to climb 3 stairs. And I remember thinking, this guy's really smart. I mean, he knows a lot about climbing 3 sets of stairs. I mean, literally 3 steps. I mean, he's talking about which muscles to use. He's talking about which foot. And I remember being so impressed by that information. and this is not to be disrespectful at all. This is, I'm really impressed with his ability to break that down. Just in my mind, that was not going to decide the stage. There was going to be
Yeah,
some other component that was going to be more important than how we got up those 3 steps. That's
sure.
just
Yeah,
my personal takeaway.
yeah.
Okay, one thing that we have to do. Well, one thing that mental management encourages people to do. We have a goal, right? You wanted to win nationals. Okay. At a certain point, we need to turn that goal, that desire, into an objective within our control. Okay. When do you begin making that change from wanting to win nationals to an objective within your control? How does that work for you?
Um, that sort of changes from a outcome-based goal into an objective about 2 weeks out from nationals or from the event. Um, on those ones where there's more perceived importance or a specific goal that I'm working towards, then it changes about 2 weeks out. And it becomes something more along the lines of, if I do X, Y, and Z, my performance will be good. My normal performance will be good. My normal performance will be great.
And talk about a normal performance, because that's really important.
So normal performance for me is a performance that I can execute on demand every time.
Right.
So I'm
Which,
executing the same mental program. I'm executing the same technical output, because the same technical output applies on every stage. We just do it in different methods, different sequences, and all of that stuff stays the same. So if I can apply that 100% of the time on demand, I know that my normal performance will be good.
right. And the word normal is so important, because to be a national champion requires a normal performance to be better than everybody else's normal or abnormal performance, right? And knowing, believing, trusting that your normal performance will give you the result that you want will prevent under trying or over trying. And have you ever experienced under trying? And well, I know you've experienced over trying. Have you ever experienced under trying?
Yeah, I have experienced that a few years ago. Uh, Sort of when I first started getting competitive on the national circuit, where I was getting top 10, top 5, I was under trying
Why?
because I hadn't met you yet. And I had no system to define.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
So I basically had no system to define what under trying was. What I thought I was doing was the correct thing, but all I was trying to do was shoot alphas at the time, and that didn't make sense. So I wasn't necessarily getting full access to all of the skills that I had trained.
And under trying is usually caused by fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
And over trying is caused by a fear of being slow.
Mm.
And that goes back to that word normal. Hey, I know that my normal performance, that's the conclusion I came to when they handed me the 3D printed paint Glock with the integral thumb rest,
Mm.
right? Um, I fired a shot into the berm, and in about 3 seconds, all of those thoughts came through, and I thought, okay, the interesting thing about this environment is the thing that I'm really good at is the key to success. And that's putting a dot in the middle of the target. I'm really good at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I think there's also a certain degree in that where I decide that my normal performance will be good, and I base that good component off of what I would expect my performance to be. So in that environment, the results not playing a role on what I would expect a normal performance to be. So it becomes more about my match more than the match.
oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really cool. I'm just going to go over here and do Gazz things, right? The things I know I'm good at, and then the results of me doing Gazz things will provide the result that I want. That's great.
yeah, yeah.
That's really healthy. Um, okay, To do well at the world shoot, do you need to get faster or more accurate?
Faster.
Okay. I just thought I'd throw you a just a crazy question out of left field because I would think that's what everybody needs to do. Um,
Mm.
once we're at a level to be a contender for a world shoot podium finish, right? Accuracy can't be a problem anymore. It just can't. Right? We've got to have already solved that. Um, what what I don't want to put you on the spot. I literally got this question just out of the blue. What kinds of things do you think you'll do to get faster?
I think that right now, um, I've got a lot of speed components that I'm working on, mostly off of just trying to find new efficiencies, getting the gun up earlier, those kinds of things. But I think getting full access to those in matches is just going to require more repetitions. And I'm also going to need to imprint correctly in training that those become normal in match environments.
Yeah,
So currently, I think it's just a case of imprinting more positively and acknowledging that what I'm doing is correct. So that the more that I acknowledge that, the more that will naturally start to come through as a subconscious skill in match environments.
brilliant. Um, will the stages, do you think, be designed by South Africans, or will that be designed by some IPSC committee somewhere else? Do you have any idea?
I believe that the South African body or the hosting organization would be doing the course designs.
Okay, that's typically how that works.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. One of the things that happens when people have big goals is a fear of failure, right? You've been a national champion how many times now? It's two or three.
This might be 5.
I'm sorry, but I had no idea. Isn't it?
No,
Isn't it? Isn't it great that you're winning so much? You're winning so much we can't even keep track of how much you're winning, right? That reminds me of I got to do a mental management class for Joey Sauerland at the gym where he works at, and I was using him as an example of self-image. And I said, yeah, and Joey just won his second area match, and he goes, seventh, or something along those lines. When you establish a really big goal, right? Let's just say podium finish at the world shoot, top three. Okay, that's a big goal.
hmm,
What do you do about the fear? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's an important question.
sure. I think that the that fear might be more of a natural thing to happen when we first define a goal that's currently outside of our comfort zones, our self-image. But the more that I make that a normal statement in my training, in my matches, and in everyday life, the more that becomes normal, my self-image starts to believe through the process um, of basically attaining that goal, that it becomes more comfortable, which the fear then starts to subside, especially when we start letting ourselves acknowledge that the technical abilities are there.
Mhm.
And if we can execute those technical abilities, then the result's more likely.
You know, Gaz, I don't know if there's a human being on the planet that could have answered that question better than you just did. Right? I
I'll
had
take the win.
I had no idea what you were going to say, but what I heard was so cool is if there's a fear of accomplishing a big goal, the fear is because the idea is abnormal, right? And as you stated, repetition of the idea, I can do this, this is going to happen, I'm doing the work to make this happen. Repeating that idea is what makes the fear go away. That's brilliant. Guys, I don't know if I could have answered that question as well as you just did. I certainly would have taken more time to formulate my answer, right? Really powerful stuff. Um, do you have any rifle experience? Long range rifle experience at all?
No.
Because I had a guy asked me a technical rifle question. I was flattered that he thought I could help him. He was talking about um, shooting a target that it's so small that he can't hold his reticle still enough on it. And so he was having trouble. What I think he's doing is the same thing people do when they shoot support hand pistol. The dot's moving so much that it bothers them. And so I think they hit the trigger too hard when they think it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And he was talking, and of course they have wind considerations too. So he can't just put it in the middle of the target necessarily. He might need to be on the left side or the right. So I just was
Yeah.
curious since you're so technical. All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about today?
No, I think we've had a good chat.
Yeah. Let me see how we're doing on time. I think we're right in that 1 hour sweet spot too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to let people know that this mental management stuff is the key to getting your skill on demand. And I don't necessarily want to turn this into an advertisement for mental management, but I do want to turn it into an advertisement to let people know you can accomplish these goals if you get your mind under control, right?
Mm.
What do you think about the whole mental management process? Was there any of it that was counterintuitive, or was there anything that you were skeptical of?
No, nothing that I was actually skeptical of.
Yeah. The thing that I was skeptical of was the journal. I was one of those guys that thought I could outsmart it. And then, like so many other things, I thought, well, if Laney says this is important, I'm going to do it. And the power of it just completely blew my mind, right?
Yeah.
I can still remember the last things I wrote in the journal about my iron sight shooting are still my default thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I controlled those imprints, I reinforced those ideas, and gosh, that was 2 years ago I did that. And those thoughts are still my default thoughts on that subject. I am still a masterclass production shooter any day of the week.
Yeah.
And I haven't touched a gun like that in a long, long time. Very, very powerful stuff. All right. So, Gaz, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We need to talk about your sponsors real quick.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Steve, for having me on the show again. It was awesome. Glad that I got the opportunity to catch up with you. As always, I'd just like to thank my sponsors for their continued support. Obviously, AndersonShooting.com, Shooting Stuff, Guns at Work, Thermite Bullets, Disney Accessories, Pit Cerakote South Africa, DVC Technologies, Force Ninja, Bad Baxter Productions, and Bernard Agencies.
And did you literally just did you just thank your own self for sponsoring your own self? I think you did.
I might have, yeah.
And what kinds of things, because DVC Technologies is doing a lot more than I was aware of. What all are you into these days?
So still doing a lot of specialized lubricants for firearms in general, semi-auto, rifles, shotguns, handguns. Some cleaning components, oil-based gun cleaners. Started going into pre-cut grip tapes for the Glock frames and the slides. The Glock cubes that we've had for a while, acrylic style dry fire targets. So it's not normal sort of MDF laser cut stuff. There's different contrasts we can introduce in those shoots, those kinds of things. Just trying to think of those. Other aerosol based cleaners and lubricants as well.
And without getting too technical, are you literally formulating new lubricant designs? Like, are you breaking it down to all the components and coming up with something new?
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
No kidding. And how many different ingredients go into gun oil? Just ballpark.
It depends. So a lot of the ones that I sort of developed, I needed to get a higher round count out of the lube without evaporation and not actually providing any lubrication properties. So some of them are just 2 or 3 components, or the ones 2 or 3 components, and then others like in excess of 5.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Always the smartest guy in the room, Garrett-John Evans. Good grief. That's amazing. All right, buddy. We need to go ahead and wrap this up. Otherwise, we'll be doing
Sure.
this all day. Thank you so much for representing AndersonShooting.com as well as you do. So proud of you and all the work that you've done, and we're going to get you on that podium at the World Shoot, buddy. We're going to do it.
Absolutely.
We're, we're going
Thank
to
you,
make.
Steve.
All right, so let's
Okay.
do the catchy catchphrase. And until we meet again in South Africa or anywhere else, be like us, do what we do, say it with us. 1, 2, 3, get to
Get
work.
to work.
All right.